Let's go to number three. This is and this is something I'm not terribly familiar with, a land value tax. Explain to us what this is.
Yeah, so the guy who made this famous was an economist named Henry George, and it's actually the principle that the board game Monopoly is based on, which is to say that when there's private ownership of land value, and by land I don't just mean the land, although I do mean that. I also mean the minerals and oil and all of the things that nature provides that human beings didn't create. Not buildings and stuff which people made, but just the natural resources. The fact that we let people pretend to own the things that they didn't make, that nobody made, that nature made, necessarily results in great poverty for some people and the consolidation of most of the property into a single trust. That's what happens in Monopoly. By the end, everybody's bankrupt except one person who has all of the resources. So a land value tax is just a way of taking that value and giving it to the people who actually make the land valuable, which is everybody. Because my landlord doesn't actually make the land valuable. The reason that I pay so much freaking rent in Manhattan to live in my apartment is because it's near parks, which the city provides, it's near subways, which the state provides, it's near a bunch of great shops and Dominican food, which the community provides. And so really it's everybody else who's not my landlord who should be deriving the value of the land. The flip, which is the main urban real estate move that they do, goes like this. A property developer will take out a bunch of money from the bank, and in order to pay the bank the interest, they'll send the bank the full rental value of the property. So they don't. The landlord doesn't actually get the rent. They just send that to the banks. What they get is after 5 years, let's say, of owning a building, they flip it, which is to say they sell it to a different landlord, and they just make off with the appreciated value of the land beneath it, which is called a capital gain, and that doesn't even get taxed if they just plow it into buying more and more real estate. So currently, the tax code, which it incentivizes the accumulation of big real estate fortunes, and by taxing labor and industry, also incentivizes things like offshoring and all sorts of other bad practices. If we flipped the way that we did the tax system, we could have Henry George proposed a single tax on natural resources, and in so doing, you could eliminate literally all other taxes. No sales tax, no income tax, no payroll tax, none of those taxes, just one tax on the people who own the natural resources. And if you look at it, you'll find that the people who own the natural resources are basically the 1%.
And so this would be an annual tax on the value of just the land, not necessarily the buildings on it.
Yes, right. So people already get property taxes, right? But a much less disruptive. And this is also a conservative idea. The Economist has argued for it really well. They have an article called "Levying the Land" that I would urge people to look up. It's a much less disruptive tax to tax the value of the land, since the land is a fixed quantity. You can't build any more of it, except as Dylan notes, in Dubai, where they build weird islands in various shapes. But basically, you can't. That's why Manhattan real estate is so valuable, because there's very, very little land. It's the one thing that's really scarce in Manhattan. And so there's high demand for it, and it's scarce. So if you tax that and bring the value of property down to its actual cost of production, then you eliminate the problems. Like, for instance, the housing bubble would never have happened, because as Arrested Development made clear, all of these McMansions that were going up in these residential developments were basically crap. They were falling apart. They were like shoddy workmanship, terrible materials. And the reason that they were so valuable was that the speculative commodity that speculators were bidding up and up and up was the value of the land beneath it. So if that value had been taxed, and all that the people who were buying new properties owned was the crappy materials that made up the actual house, the speculative bubble would never have happened.
And so what does this do? I mean, is this in your mind imposed by the federal government? What does it do to sort of the revenue that municipalities, that towns get from property taxes as we know it now?
there's some debate over whether it would be constitutional, whether it's a direct tax, and whether it could be done at a federal level. I actually don't think it would need to be done at a federal level because most land is not very expensive. I think that really where it should be done is places like San Francisco and New York, places where land is extremely scarce and extremely valuable, and where prices just go up and up and up, which forces working class and poor people to leave their communities. It shreds communities apart. So I think the best place to impose a land value tax would be in individual cities. But you could do it federally. There's a blogger named, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Ashok Rao, Ashok, last name Rao, who is an extremely impressive 18-year-old freshman at UPenn who writes really, really eloquently about this. So if people are interested in land value tax, they ought to look up Ashok Rao.
And we should say that there are examples already in this country. In Pennsylvania, I think, is one of those states where there's a bunch of towns that already do this.
Yep, absolutely. That and we ought to note that a universal basic income is already happening in Alaska, which we'll get to, I guess, in the next one. But all of these proposals, except the first one, already happen in the United States, and the first one is enshrined in the Indian Constitution. So none of these is outlandish. They're all extant, viable options.